Over 4,000 years ago, one of the world's first great civilizations stood at the absolute pinnacle of human achievement. They built massive, intricate cities, they engineered systems that literally defied their era. And then, they just vanished. No giant battles, no fiery apocalypse, just an empty, haunting silence. Today, we're going to unravel the chilling mystery of the Indus Valley Civilization. Imagine walking through a thriving, ancient metropolis. The streets are buzzing with trade, water is flowing perfectly through complex aqueducts, and life is just echoing off these massive baked brick walls. Now, imagine walking those exact same streets, but the voices are gone. The homes are totally empty, the water has stopped. 4 millennia ago, 1 million square kilometers went utterly, terrifyingly silent. Their vast trade networks collapsed, and the people simply faded from the historical record. 1 million square kilometers. The sheer staggering scale of what we lost is almost impossible to wrap your head around. Emerging around 3300 BCE, this society, also known as the Harappan Civilization, stretched across massive chunks of modern-day India and Pakistan. It was one of the largest civilizations in the entire ancient world. We're talking a footprint way larger than early Egypt, larger than Mesopotamia, and yet it's kept its secrets completely buried in the dust. To really grasp the tragedy of their fall, you have to understand the sheer brilliance of their peak. Cities like Harappa, Mohenjo-daro, Dholavira, and Rukki weren't just primitive, thrown-together settlements. They were absolute masterclasses in urban planning. Their roads were laid out in perfect grids. They built with standardized baked bricks. In Mohenjo-daro, nearly every single house had access to water and private baths, with wastewater flowing through covered sewage drains right beneath the streets. This level of engineering was centuries, if not millennia, ahead of its time. But here's where it gets really weird. Look at their famous piers. In ancient Egypt or Mesopotamia, you see towering pharaohs, monumental tombs, giant stone carvings filled with violent royal propaganda. The Indus Valley? There is absolutely nothing like that. No giant palaces, no evidence of brutal emperors demanding to be worshipped. Instead, we see bricks made to the exact same, precise ratios across cities that were hundreds of miles apart. Standardized weights, perfectly coordinated water systems. Their power didn't come from a brutal conqueror. It came from masterful, unprecedented organization. And yet, for all of that brilliance, they remain completely voiceless to us. We found their intricately carved seals, which were traded as far away as Mesopotamia. But the Indus script itself, it remains totally undeciphered. It's a locked door. We don't know what their rulers were called, we don't know what gods they prayed to, and honestly, the most terrifying part is that we can't read the words they wrote as their world began to slowly, irreversibly die. Their beliefs are locked behind a code we just can't break. Part 1. The False Apocalypse. For decades, we really thought we knew how this story ended. We were looking for a cinematic disaster. Was it destroyed by a violent invasion? Early historians heavily pushed the Aryan invasion theory. That was the idea that sweeping, violent Indo-Aryan tribes charged into the subcontinent and basically slaughtered the civilization in a massive fiery blitz. It was dramatic, it was simple, it painted this vivid picture of swinging swords and burning walls. But here is where the mystery deepens. Modern archaeology has completely dismantled that theory. The evidence simply does not exist. If you dig deep into the ruins of Mohenjo-daro and Harappa, what do you actually find? Nothing. No widespread burn layers, no signs of massive systemic warfare, no sudden destruction horizon. These cities were not violently destroyed in a weekend of blood and fire. They were slowly, quietly abandoned. The old theory was a total dead end.
Part 2. When the rivers died.
If no army marched on their gates, the true killer wasn't written in blood. It was written in the soil. The Indus civilization was built entirely on water. They depended heavily on seasonal floods, deep rivers, and the reliable, steady rhythm of the monsoon. But modern climate research reveals a devastating shift. We're talking decades of rising temperatures, years of weakening monsoons, and ultimately an entire century of megadroughts. This wasn't a quick death. It was a suffocating, terrifyingly slow climate crisis. The data shows a 10 to 20% drop in annual rainfall. Now to us, sitting in our modern homes, a 20% drop might just sound like a slightly dry summer. But for a highly synchronized agricultural society that was utterly dependent on seasonal rivers, it was an absolute death sentence. The rivers weakened, the floodplains shrank, and those perfectly organized systems that sustained 1 million square kilometers, they began to crack.
Part 3. The slow unraveling.
So, what actually happens when a highly advanced society realizes it simply does not have enough food to survive? It unravels in this grim, unstoppable domino effect. First, the rivers weaken. Then, without water, those vast agricultural networks fail. The massive granaries sitting in those perfectly planned city grids, they empty out. The cities begin to starve. And finally, the populations are forced to migrate. The magnificent, standardized systems, the identical baked bricks, the long-distance commerce, the brilliant covered sewers, they all completely broke down. Large-scale construction just stopped entirely. But here's the thing. The people of the Indus Valley didn't just vanish into thin air. This wasn't an extinction. It was a transformation. Over generations, they slowly abandoned their fading metropolitan hubs. They migrated eastward, retreating to much smaller, rural settlements where the water was still reliable. They traded the glory of those massive, perfectly gridded cities for the basic, gritty necessity of survival. The civilization didn't die in a sudden fire. It just dissolved.
Part 4. A haunting warning.
By 1900 BCE, the great urban age of the Indus was completely over. As historians have noted, it fell one failed monsoon at a time. And man, that phrase carries a terrifying weight. Think about it. A society with advanced engineering and incredible, unprecedented organization wasn't brought down by the sword. It was brought down by the quiet, relentless shift of the climate. It was suffocated by water stress and environmental collapse, year after painful year. And that leaves us looking directly into a mirror. We live in an era of sprawling, interconnected megacities. We're heavily reliant on incredibly complex supply chains and very fragile environmental balances. The Indus Valley Civilization proved that even the most brilliantly planned societies are fundamentally at the mercy of the natural world. Their tragic ending feels incredibly, uncomfortably familiar. So I'll leave you with this. What haunting warning does the silent dissolution of the Indus Valley hold for our modern world?